it was touching and also sometimes triggering. To be honest, at first, I didn't know that I would be not welcomed in that space, so to speak, but that I had a role I could play in that space because of that male dominated, very military and law enforcement focus. Being able to understand how others might view things is a really important part of building bridges and also finding paths to collaboration.
I'm your host, Soraya, and this is Diaspora and Development, where we give voice to people of the diaspora working in international development. My guest today is Tara Arthur. Tara is the CEO and co-founder of the Collective Security Group that provides safety and security support for nonprofits and businesses. She has more than 25 years of experience in martial arts, and she is the founding director of the Faces of Martial Arts. With the changing needs in the humanitarian sector, Tara discusses the importance of contextualizing risk and adapting to challenges of policy changes in the U.S. She delves into the importance of security and safety in an ever-changing world, and why diversity is key to providing better services to her clients. Thank you for joining me today, Tara.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory? What led you to the place that you are now?
Sure. So currently I am the CEO of Collective Security Group, and I can share more about that in a minute, and how it led me to what I'm really pleased to be doing there. I work in safety and security, and my entire life I've done martial arts. So my family upbringing, my father was a martial artist, and I am Haitian American. I should start with that. And karate, Haiti, um, self-awareness, protection, all these things have always been kind of a part of my upbringing, my ability to connect with others. All of these things kind of all sat in harmony. So when I was growing up, we had a karate school, and in the karate school, I was able to obviously train and work with a range of ages. As I grew in the ranks of the martial arts world, I also was able to train others of varying ages, and I became a resource to people along the way. People who were traveling and having different experiences or going through different things, I would provide them different advice or tips and strategies because I had a lot of, self-defense and martial arts experiences growing up. And being Haitian intersected with that world because even at my martial arts studio that my father ran, we would receive a lot of cultural community events, and we're a home for a lot of the Haitian community during different points of crisis that was facing the country. And it was an opportunity for me to see the bridge of the world between sports, development, and just my cultural heritage. And I think all of that really led me on the path to, going to school. I studied political science, and then in grad school, I studied international development. And what I had hoped, I've always been a champion of Haiti my entire life and wanted to see, some of the things that I noticed in myself, the benefits of doing martial arts in my younger years and continuing to do it, what it illuminated in me, especially as a woman. And so those unseemingly connected worlds were actually extremely interconnected and interwoven. So I studied international development, and my focus was on sports development and women's self-efficacy. And I looked at martial arts as a path to that, as an example. And, at the time, sport and development was in its very young, youthful years and not really a thing of the sector. Now it's got its place in the sector, which is great to see. And there's a lot of, good practice being developed around that. But in those earlier stages, it was a lot of, having to connect the dots, especially around something like the martial arts. So my background in safety and security, and how that progresses is when you work in the development community, safety and security in itself is a fairly newer part of the development and humanitarian sector, a bit older in the humanitarian sector, and that's where its birth came from, is in that humanitarian community. The thing is that a lot of the people who were, regarded in those positions were ex-military, ex-former police, law enforcement, all of that kind of background was the typical background you saw.
How is that? That's a particular thing because I've worked in international development. I lived abroad. I've worked in the humanitarian sector, and it is mostly a male-dominated military police background. And what's your difference? What do you bring that's different?
Oh, that's a great question. So, to be honest, at first, I didn't know that I would be, not welcomed in that space, so to speak, but that I had a role I could play in that space because of that. Exactly what you described as very male dominated, very military and law enforcement focused. It was through mentorship through others who were in those positions that helped me see that my unique value add, but also the value add that others who might not have that career path in their background have a lot to offer, the needs to understand risk in the humanitarian development space. And so for me, I think my martial arts background plays a huge role, but also my self-awareness as someone who has, worked in Haiti and other countries and understands the cultural and programmatic pieces as well as the technical security pieces. And that is a bridge that is really essential when we're looking at the humanitarian development space. And there's a recognition of the growing need for that. It's not to say that there isn't an important place for, people with great ex-military or law enforcement skill sets. That's still an important role and there's still a lot of value there. But there is something really important that people can bring that may not have that background. And sometimes that's the softer skills. Sometimes it's the ability to analyze or look at things from a different vantage point or have alignment with a lot of the people that, are there, that we're there to support and able to do the work that we are trying to achieve in the humanitarian development community. So for me, I think it's because I've worked as those people, I understand the risks and I know the program work. It helps me better protect them from things and serve kind of as a bridge between those
And
worlds.
how does a collective security group differentiate itself in providing human-centered security solutions for NGOs and humanitarian organizations?
Great question. One thing that I think is I'm really proud about Collective Security Group is we are very human centered and we really take time to prioritize this idea of like a person centered approach to safety and security, really looking at individuals and their unique factors in the context that they work in the environments that they face. We know that things are not one size fits all. And so for us, it's really about helping organizations and individuals. And so when we're working with organizations, it's helping them realize that, everyone has an intersectional identity and everybody looks at things differently. And it can be a bit overwhelming for some organizations to understand how can you serve the needs of your diverse workforce in a way that is still, supporting your operational objectives. And the way you do that is actually by listening to your staff and creating spaces. And we help organizations do that in a way that streamlines their safety and security perspectives and helps them kind of build their preparedness and resilience. We also help individuals. And so, individuals face a range of risk factors and just helping people understand what that means for themselves is really key. And we recognize that there's a lot we can do with where you're facing, where you're going, where you might be. And we work alongside those people. So we have a lot of experience and expertise that we pull from, but so do the people that we're there supporting. And so we want to harness and amplify what they already know and give them and equip people with the tools that they need to, make themselves navigate a difficult situation or prepare themselves to mitigate against something.
So give us an example. I think a lot when I travel of all the things that the men don't have to think of when I have to travel, even when I'm walking from home. I think, I was walking home yesterday and I saw somebody odd and I was like, I'll have to wait for that person to walk quite further away from me. And I think to myself, men don't have to think about that. So if Tara is traveling to Sudan and Bob is traveling to Sudan, what does an organization need to know about what Tara needs to look at and what Bob needs to look at?
That's a great question. There's two things I would say right off is that one, it depends on what the organization is there to do. We have to look at the organization purpose, what their profile is there. And then we need to look at Bob and whoever, I think you said me, right? What am I doing there? What's my background? Who am I and what's my role there? And also not to homogenize the environments we're going to face within those contexts. And also I do, really focus. I think women face a lot of different risks in a lot of different environments, but men also sometimes face different risks that we don't always think about in different environments. And so it's all very contextual. And, what's Bob's background, his intersectional, considerations, including things like health, nationality, race, ethnicity, all of these factors. We need to look at the whole person and then we look at the context. We can build a historical understanding of what's happening in Sudan, but also what's currently happening and how do those intersectional identities play. And so an organization, what they can do is they can help equip their staff with information, and the staff also has a role where they can understand how their identities and intersectional needs align with what the objectives that they're being sent out for. But it's really important that organizations maintain a strong duty of care, and at the heart of it, organizations do have a duty of care to be there for their staff. So it really looks like having a concerted plan in place and being able to support the staff members who are traveling with the key information to give them their best way to be successful.
And do you look at mental health security at all? It's just a question because, as you know, in the humanitarian field, a lot of people work from crisis to crisis, which I've always thought was not mentally sound, and also a disservice to the people who are supposed to provide help or aid and who are supposed to receive aid from people who are mentally stressed.
I think that's a really important point. For me, I think well-being and a focus on mental health is essential and is a critical component of safety and security, in my opinion. And I think when we are at our best mentally and physically, that to the extent we can, and we're putting mitigations in place, that helps us all be better. I'm not a professional, a mental health professional, in that I couldn't determine someone's mental fitness to perform a function, but what I can say is when we are prioritizing those needs, it's going to make us all safer for the individual, because the whole well-being component is so key. If you're not feeling well, and whatever that not well looks like for you, you might not be optimizing your ability to work and perform at the levels that we need you to. And thus, if we can make sure that you are performing at your best, it makes you safer and more aware, to also mitigate some of the risks that you might be facing doing that kind of work. So I think well-being, mental health should absolutely be prioritized, and the appropriate culturally aware and contextual realities for what that looks like for people should be considered also.
So, what was that moment that led you to Collective Security Group? You have a background in martial arts in Haiti, which is very, very interesting. And I think there's not a lot known about the importance of martial arts in Haiti. And then to that aha moment that, oh, I can put this all together.
Oh, I love this question. And I'll tell you, I have to thank my Haitian sisters, especially, and my family for really, I think, helping me drive to that aha moment. So I've always, I feel like I'm driven by my ancestors, always felt that way about everything. But I think where those worlds collided has been a journey. It wasn't always present. I think other people may have seen sparks of it in me and have tried to encourage me down that path. And I'm grateful for those pushes and nudges. But I think the full spectrum of that ability to piece it all together really has come through experience. And what I mean is, you know, when you have the opportunities in the sector to learn all the different parts of the sector and outside of the safety and security realm and see how these pieces, there's something that did spark in me. And I can't give you the exact moment because I think those moments built and built and built over time. And it was just, I think, I realized that I was at a point in my journey that my voice, I felt needed to speak louder. And I felt like I was in a position to continue. I felt a need to serve in a different light, but connecting the pieces that, people have always respected in me. And I felt like Collective Security Group and my partner who I work with was a really important piece of this as well. And building this collective security group allowed me to connect those dots. And I think that was little bits along the way. And I can't, pin it to one exact moment, but I'm going to keep reflecting on that. Maybe there will be one that comes
You
up.
wrote an article on inclusive security where you discuss how race, ethnicity, and nationality impact aid workers' safety. Could you elaborate on that article and the key findings and implications for our organizations in the humanitarian sector?
Sure. So I worked on that article with Leah Mutard, my colleague at the time, and we did that article. I was at GISF, and it was such a wonderful opportunity to work on something that I think was particularly important for the sector to pay attention to. So we have done a good job of trying to draw more attention to diversity and understanding how diversity intersects with, safety and security, and looking out at that kind of bigger picture of diversity. But we really also need to focus on the lens of what race, ethnicity, and nationality means. And there was less attention, less focus on that. And I think for some, there was a lot of discomfort to talk about it. So it was a really important opportunity for us to really talk about that issue because it affects safety and security in such a significant way. And a lot of people, find many ways to talk about it without talking about it. And so we were like, we need to talk about it because it's real. There are challenges, there are real risks, there are real people affected by this, and we have an opportunity to really make a difference. And so I'm really grateful for all the contributors who contributed to it. And I will tell you, as a woman of color in the sector, and I say this sometimes when I talk about this piece, I resonated with a lot of the people we were able to interview and work with on it. Um, and it was touching and also sometimes triggering. Um, and I think it's important to acknowledge that reality, especially when we work in a sector that sometimes, especially as a diaspora member, sometimes we're working in environments where we know a lot, or we empathize a lot with the communities that we're working with and things like that. And so for me, being able to work on that piece, I think one of the key findings I felt and personally out of that is more work needs to be done on race, ethnicity, nationality, and security risk management, and more acknowledgement of what that role is in the sector. And I don't think there's a lot. I mean, I think there's so much more there's much more room is what I was trying to say. There's so much more room for that dialogue that this is something we're going to see evolve, that we had to make that. There are pockets of where you see those conversations in other parts of the development and humanitarian sector, where you see that, even on the decolonization, you see that in, sometimes it's pegged to localization. But one thing that's important to me, and I'm so grateful to have worked with such an amazing co-author on that piece, some of the things that I think resonated there is you can't just leave those in isolation. And there's some distinctions in that. And for people to understand how these things are, distinctively different and how we unpack them so that we don't just label everything under one label is really important.
An example that comes to mind, I'm Haitian Canadian. I have passport safety. I can go places. I will have experiences because of a woman of color and immigration problems, but I can enter easily. So give us some examples.
I love that example. And I think passports and passport currency, for lack of a better way to articulate it, I think is a real thing. So, for example, like you said, someone who may have my profile, I would identify myself as a Black American woman, Haitian descent. If I am traveling somewhere and I'm with you and you have that Canadian citizenship, there's certain contexts where you're going to go through the line really quickly and I'm gonna get that secondary screening. And even though we have, what could potentially to on paper look like similar profiles, which is why it's so important to have discussions and not make assumptions about people. Um, to unpack those things, and also understanding that you're dual national. What does that mean? Which passport are you traveling on? And understanding all of that. And then how you're perceived versus how you identify are not always the same. And that changes from context to context. And so you can't homogeneize anything, right? And if I go to Haiti at some points, I could be considered, you know, very different than if I go in the peak of summer. All of these things, how you identify doesn't always align with how you're received, and that could change even within the same country context, right? So that's why it's important to understand where you are, where you're going, when. All of these things, play a role, and that's why safety and security is an ongoing thing and not just during an emergency. It's a ongoing practice that needs to be part of your everyday um, operations.
So, diversity and equity is getting a lot of pushback lately. Some companies are rolling back. Do you think diversity is a thing of the past in your sector? Why or why not?
Do you mean the development and humanitarian sector or the safety and security sector?
Both.
I would like to hope it's not. I I don't know that I can answer that. And the reason is I feel like, diversity is a beautiful thing that is so in that word encompasses so many facets. So for it to disappear would be very linguistically complicated, I think. And so to answer that question, this is how I think I would answer that. We as people are always going to be who we are, and we're going to always carry our identities the way we are in different environments. So whether you use the word diversity or not doesn't take or change the risk in and of itself of where you might be facing. So, um, I'll argue that I'd like for communities to be able to talk to one another in meaningful ways that is respectful and mutually beautiful, but also how language changes and evolves is something that we're going to see over time, but it doesn't have to take away what each of us brings. It doesn't have to take away how we address things.
What strategies do you recommend for organizations to move beyond acknowledging diversity to actively integrating it into their security protocols?
I think the first step is for organizations to to acknowledge it, and that it does have an important role that can play. And I would say that organizations can start talking to their staff. That's probably the first step is, are you talking to your staff? What do you know about your staff? And then we can build the plan from there.
How have recent U.S. policy changes affected the operational security landscape for humanitarian organizations?
I believe that for me, I look at the current US landscape like I would any country. And for some of us, that's how we look at the US or any other environment. So whatever's happening in the US discourse is definitely dramatic and I think needs attention and is heavy. And the sheer magnitude of change definitely feels fast. However, if we look at the sector and kind of more of a decolonized approach, I would argue that, and we kind of we take away the US as a donor country and we take away some of those considerations. What's happening there is demonstrating that America is just like other countries. And so when we are recognizing that all of us in the global sphere are contributors to the development and humanitarian community and also can be recipients of that, I think we can move towards a place where we acknowledge that when there are shifts and dynamics in these communities, we can maybe absorb those shocks in different ways. Now, I think there are a lot of considerations of how this affects different groups, and I think it depends on the groups of whether it enables or creates strain. It depends on, the types of operations you have in the sector, but it's without question that this is presenting a difficult challenge for the community. But also, I think it's important for us to dissect, where those points of challenge can meet different points of opportunity, and how we can, take this moment and work through it together.
What role does the diaspora play in bridging cultural and contextual gaps in humanitarian operations?
Massive, massive role. Um, for me, I think, being in the diaspora or being diaspora can help understand your home country or your cultural country's experiences, and it allows you to have a different level of empathy in a way that I think develops respect, but there's also this understanding of how others might view your home country. And being able to understand how others might view things is a really important part of building bridges and also finding paths to collaboration, because we do need each other in this. I think um, there's a lot that our diaspora can do to support and amplify the voices of people at home, and also to acknowledge when support is needed and when to step back and when to step up. And I think there's an opportunity to be that not only bridge but that guide between when you need that kind of support and how to get that voice out beyond just the home environment. I think it serves a massive role, and the diaspora communities have been doing this forever, and they know how to do it, and they'll be there the whole time, whether certain places, are facing challenges or not. The diaspora is still there, and the diaspora knows what to do. And sometimes they will have to adapt and be creative. But if anybody knows how to do that, it's the diaspora, because they've already are navigating both multiple sides or one side or several sides, depending, because the diaspora is so vast. Some of our diaspora members span several countries, and they can navigate multiple bridges at the same time. And so how do we tap into that while amplifying the people at home that need it most?
I said it before in other interviews that it's a superpower. This hybrid culture, it's a superpower. And it's a superpower in terms of how you can serve your own community, but also how you can serve other communities, because you have that built-in empathy. You can see when people are being othered.
I love that. Absolutely. We got to use our superpowers.
Indeed. You're an entrepreneur, basically. What advice would you give to someone who is about to embark in creating their own organization?
Oh, yeah, being an entrepreneur, it's a journey. And I've heard other entrepreneurs say this, and it's interesting once you've found your thing. So for me, I've, started up many different things. I've driven lots of different initiatives. I've been a part of a lot of great things, and some I'm still part of and still working on. And so as an entrepreneur, I feel like our creative energy is something that drives us. And I think you have to trust yourself and do it in the time that makes sense for you. Because others might see things in you, and you don't lose it. Don't lose the things that you see in yourself and that others see in you, but you still have to do it in the time that makes sense for you. And so I think for me, that's what I'm realizing as an entrepreneur, and really appreciating this space, is to not only trust myself, but to trust my instincts and to respect the experiences that I have and the value I do bring, and the need that I'm serving. And I think balancing all those perspectives and realities makes me really appreciate what it means to be an entrepreneur. And I'm loving it. It's challenging. It's terrifying sometimes, to be honest, but it's also such a privilege, I think, to be able to have a skill set that I do in a time that needs a lot of this skill. And I feel really grateful and a lot of gratitude to be able to combine these elements in something meaningful.
Do you have anyone that you admire and why?
Oh my gosh, I have so many people I admire. Of course, my family
Mhm.
I admire, but I honestly admire a lot of diaspora women, especially my Haitian women diaspora women. They inspire me in ways that I can't describe. Um, I I truly feel the energy of our community in so many actions and in so many spaces, whether I'm seeing them in the development humanitarian space, do their thing, or in other sectors, amazing business world, or other international efforts. It's very motivating, very moving, whether they're at home making the daily changes, like those are the women that are driving my energy. And there are men too, there and people in general who I think are hugely important to me. And I couldn't just name one because, I'm that I'm that I'm that person that is like, I can't just name one. I was like, I've got like a laundry list of people who have made such an impact on me. And honestly, like so many people that I have the blessing to have encountered, so many people I've had the blessing to have gotten feedback from or learned from. All of these little interactions have been part of my inspiration. So I have a lot of gratitude to give.
What's next for you?
What's next for me? I'm really, um, I think what's next for me is really focusing on this idea of continuing to support safety and security for communities, and really advancing why safety and security is so important and what it means, not just in the development and humanitarian space, but a lot of spaces. And the work we do at Collective Security Group spans beyond the development and humanitarian sector. We work with movement builders, we work with businesses, we work with a lot of different actors, and all those experiences really help us harness how we can support all of those communities and their needs. So for me, it's continuing to invest in and to support um, need where we can. And we know that the sector, the humanitarian development sector in particular, is facing a vulnerable time. Our movement builders are facing, you know, different times as well. And I think for us, what's important to me is even in these financial constraints and challenging times, finding creative ways to support each other and doing my part as a contributor to improving safe outcomes. I'm going to keep doing that in the ways that we can, and trying to leverage support for all of the groups that we can reach.
And what's your hope for the future in these uncertain times?
I hope we don't waste this crisis. I hope we don't waste this crisis moment. And I remember feeling similar after different points in Haiti's journey. But one thing that always I think is key is it's not to say focus on the positive or placate
Mhm.
resilience, but I feel like we have an opportunity to come together. And what that looks like is going to have to evolve with time and need. And that's what I really hope. I hope we use this time to really come together, to build together, and to acknowledge that, what we're building has to evolve as things change too. And focusing on positive things is so important, and not at the expense of acknowledging the challenging parts, but as a reminder to show that light through the challenge, that there are some pockets of we're able to support this initiative. You were able to deliver that program safer. You were able to achieve this outcome. We want to acknowledge and celebrate these moments. We want to shine lights on the joys and work hard to mitigate the challenges. And so you know I think it's looking at not wasting the challenge, no, not wasting a crisis. And that's said from a place of healing, because um, it's we're in the midst of it for a lot of us, and many of us are experiencing a range of issues related to it. And I acknowledge whatever people are feeling, they should feel it. And I just, I guess I really hope that we hold on to um, the inertia of moving in a direction that brings us closer and brings us to more good.
Thank you, Tara.
Join us every first Tuesday of the month. Don't forget to like us, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and find us on Instagram and on our website if you'd like to be featured as a guest or have any recommendations for guests. We look forward to hearing from you.